I sound so important being introduced by her with her lovely radio voice. Hang on, I have to like open this because I'm reading off of this. Yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really amazed to be here, actually. You have a great community, and everyone's been really welcoming to me. So, yeah, she actually got the intro out of the way, but yeah, about me. My writing is about 50% business journalism and about half culture journalism. I try to write about games as experiences and as storytelling. I'm really interested in the experience of games creators and of the people who play them. And I'm always trying to find new ways to talk about why we're drawn to interactivity and digital storytelling and play as learning and things like that. So I guess before I begin, how many of you do not have a gaming background? Could I get a show of hands? Oh, awesome. Wow, cool. So, and how many of you are like film people? Sweet. And neither film nor games? Something else? Oh, amazing. I'm really excited that this is a cross-disciplinary event. I can only speak from the perspective of games and social media. And one of the reasons I started trying to do the kind of work that I do is that as much as I love games and I'm excited by them, I'm even more excited about what I believe that they can become. I think a lot about the unique experiences that interactivity can add to entertainment, and gaming and digital play can offer us really incredible ways to engage with one another and the world around us. In particular, creative storytellers have an opportunity to make their work a living dialogue between themselves and their participants that I think doesn't get replicated in other media. And given that gaming is such a relatively young form, I think it's impressive that we've made such great strides in penetrating this wider cultural consciousness, in getting people that aren't from games or people that maybe might have had misconceptions about games to come and join us and to really start to experience how powerful they can be and to come on board with our visions. But given that games are so new as compared to other media, we do have a lot of growing to do and a lot of things to learn and a lot of potential yet to fulfill. As new platforms emerge and the language of games makes its way into the mainstream consciousness in never-before-seen ways, I see that we have this incredible opportunity to evolve. And I'm in the games world up to my neck, and sometimes I get frustrated with the pace of growth, with the fact that there are still so many people who don't feel included. Like, a lot of times I feel like an evangelist, without enough converts yet. And the more time I spend in the space, the more time I spend in the space, the more I become absolutely certain that the biggest impediment to deep, meaningful, interactive entertainment experiences becoming relevant to everyone is that the base of people making them is still pretty homogenous. I mean, I completely take issue with the idea that modern video games are like just for teenage boys, or that they're pointless escapism, or that they're dumb and violent, or whatever prejudicial things people tend to say. I've actually devoted my life to challenging that misconception, so I feel strongly about it. However, if you'll allow me to make a generalization for 1 second, it is true that gaming's roots lie in appealing mainly to the young dudes. These guys grew up clutching their joysticks, and they loved it so much they became game developers. And they began making the kind of games that they loved when they were young for people like themselves and their friends. So the result is that the most visible band of the gaming medium is necessarily constricted to audiences who have things in common with its creators. There isn't anything inherently wrong with that by itself. If people want to play giant army guys fighting space alien raiders with machine guns and nothing else, I'm really glad they have the opportunity to do that in an advanced, high-tech, modern way that people lavish a lot of attention on. But for me, I'm not a young dude, obviously, and none of my friends are. And if my wish is to see an evolving landscape of games that people from all walks of life can enjoy, this homogeneous model of creation is not going to get me there. So cross-pollination between game development and other industries is one way to add new voices and perspectives to our art, which is why I think it's wonderful that idea exchange is gaining steam. Love hearing of other people, from people of other industries being attracted to working with games, even though they didn't grow up with them, because we need those fresh voices. We need alternate approaches and new minds. Diversity in game development is absolutely essential to the future health of the medium. I absolutely believe that. I don't know if Michael Stipe from REM teaming up with the lady from the B-52s is really the best thing for the health of their medium, but I'm not a music journalist, so whatever. So diversity is important is sort of a nice little platitude, you're probably thinking. Because when I talk about homogeny in the space in which I work, I don't just mean one's working background or their hobbyist experience or their education. the issue that I'm getting at is that there is not enough racial, cultural, or gender diversity in game development to create this really lush palette of voices that we need to help move the medium forward. But you know that already, which is why we're all here today, and which is why I've been asked here to talk about women in games. Okay, so why do we need to talk about women in games? We're here, I think, to look at the problems of why there tend to be fewer female voices in our spaces and what we can do about it. So we've established that the reason that the game industry feels insular is that creators are limited to working within their own perspectives, doing work that's informed by their own experience. So I thought I would share with you some of my experiences in my field as a woman in games and tell you about some of the things that I've had to learn along what's really been like a challenging and complicated road for me, and I hope some of the things that I have learned about myself will be of value to other people. So I do spend a lot of time, even though I do business journalism and a lot of culture writing, and I write in the mainstream print a lot and things like that, I do spend a lot of time writing for gamers on the internet. And in the course of my work, I have been called a number of things and been told a number of adjectives about myself. Attention whore, shrew, I'm loud, apparently. Can you all hear me okay? I'm a babbling fangirl. I never shut up. I need to be quiet and go make a sandwich. These are actual things that people have said about me or sent to me in emails. I guess I might have given something like 4 stars instead of 5 stars, and now there are death threats. I don't know. That happens. I mean, that happens to everyone who writes on the internet. Where anonymity provides people the security to say what they want, anyone who is really vocal or visible is bound to draw a lot of opinions, and not all of them are going to be positive. Equally weird is all the date requests from strangers that I get because of my job. I get these emails or people tweeting at me who really want to pay me an alarming amount of attention, and I just don't think it's because I write that well. But among the criticisms here, you probably notice a common thread, and it's many people are gendering their insults, which suggests that they are threatened by a woman speaking up. And I'm not really good at being quiet. I kind of have a hard time shutting up, in fact, so it hasn't always been easy for me. In fact, it's been complicated. It's been difficult being a visible pundit in a space that is, generally conceived of as male-dominated, enjoys an active, anonymous internet community, and that seems to be oriented around a primarily male audience. There are some people across the board, men and women alike, who often expect that I'm to speak for all women, or they think that I'm trying to speak for all women, which, of course, there's no way I can do that. Every time there's a discussion in the games community about, whether they should be offended by Catwoman's outfit or something, I get emails like I am expected to provide an official edict on it, because I am a woman, I have the power to say it's okay or that it's not okay, and they look to me to know how to feel. That's a weird mandate that I don't really want because I can't speak for all women, but there's a vocal minority of people who seem to want to discredit me based on my gender, or if I say something that they don't agree with about something not gender-related at all, they're going to react against me twice as virulently, because they're probably teenage boys, I hope, who are going through a time in their lives when women seem foreign and scary to them. I mean, there's adults doing that. It's a little disturbing, so I prefer to believe it's mostly teenage boys. And I wrestle a lot with wondering the degree to which my gender informs my taste in games or my feelings around my experiences. I frequently feel, disconnected from others in the community or unsure of where to fit in, where I want to fit in. I think after a long time of being marginalized or feeling oppressed as nerds or whatever, gamers in the 21st century, the 21st century has established games as this incredibly valid, legitimate, artistically and economically powerful medium, and I think that sense of power feels really new to that particular community of traditional gamers who, they're used to having a private club and having to defend themselves. I think that the sudden opening in this place that used to be a safe place for them just allows them to justify becoming super protective, hyper insular, and afraid of seeing gaming culture change or of seeing new types of voices on the scene. And I find woman in games a really reductive way to describe what I do, or what any of us do. Woman is one of many adjectives with which I would describe myself, and every woman in this audience, if asked to describe herself, would have an entirely different list from me, and she might not even put woman particularly high up. I mean, gender is a spectrum on which many people choose to identify differently. It's very personal. I recently saw Matt Bach from Harmonix speak at NYU about Dance Central, which is a fantastic game, and he particularly emphasized that it had tried hard not to legislate the gender of the player's dance performance, and he said, gender is ultimately performance anyway, and that really stuck with me. So I think that's actually something that those who identify as men in the tech world might have a hard time relating to, or those who are, have always identified as men. And I think most men deal with their own challenges about what their gender is supposed to mean for their identity, but I think those struggles are more implicit or more normative. I'm not sure. But like, I feel like men probably aren't asked that often for their perspective as a man. Like, how many men, how often do you hear, like, as a man, what do you think of this? No, people just ask you what you think. It can't possibly be as often as the women in this room have been asked to gender their ideas or to have a woman's perspective. So actually, I'm going to ask a little bit of a personal question by show of hands. Ladies in this room, how many of you have had a friend say to you, oh, you need to meet so-and-so, she does some work similar to you, and you should meet another woman? How many people try to network for you based on other people's genders, right? So you've had that happen a lot. And how many of you have a sort of complicated reaction to that, either overtly or subliminally? Yeah, some of you do. Like, I've always had a nagging sensation that, it shouldn't matter that this person that I'm encouraged to meet is another woman, or that it shouldn't be, the reason for well-intentioned people wanting us to team up. But, like, I'm torn. I'm always torn. And speaking just for myself, there are two facts about me about which I'm completely certain. One is that I do identify as a woman, and the other is that it is impossible for me to speak from any other perspective than my own. And being a woman is a part of that. So though I sometimes do resist the tendency to make my gender such an emphasized and enormous factor in my experience of the world and of my medium, it is a factor. I may sometimes wince when I work my ass off to cover the game industry from a variety of angles, whether that's interviews with engine manufacturers, interviews with game developers. I write a completely, genderless review of something, or I cover a conference, and no matter how much of that I do, some of my readers call me that female writer, or the feminist writer, or Leigh Alexander, the feminist perspective journalist, even though I don't actually write about feminism that much. I'm not I didn't do gender studies in school. I don't feel that I have an authority really to speak on feminism to people, and yet people assume that's what I'm doing just because I'm a vocal woman, you know what I mean? But how can I have any other perspective than my own experience? How can I not be speaking as a woman? And why should I not? Why should any of us devalue that voice, So this is why we're all here, because being a woman is a factor in our experience, or because we're curious about the ways gender can be a factor in the experience of others. I think that's so important to us as people who work in expressive media. Whether you're in film, games, social media, broadcasting, film, television, entertainment, education, I want to emphasize this again because I strongly believe in it. The things that we create benefit greatly from having a diversity of perspective. Each of us individually is only capable of speaking from our own experience, so we need to work with people whose experiences are different from ours if we're going to challenge ourselves, if we're going to grow. So that's how we can end up reaching this wide and diverse range of people. If we want to see games mature, if we want more people to get them and to play them, if we want to enhance the depth of the experiences that we can have in the mainstream gaming industry and who they can be for, we have to have diversity on our teams. That's how we create a rich and healthy participatory culture around our products. And that's how we can also counteract some of the cultural inbreeding that goes on in an insular medium like mine, when it's mostly the same type of people who only know how to make games for the same type of person. I probably don't really need to define what cultural inbreeding in games looks like. We're all here because we know that medium needs new voices, needs to speak to different people. And I'm not even interested in that rant that you've probably already heard about how video games are so alienating because most of them are theoretically these hyper-sexed male power fantasies. Because actually, I don't think that's even fully true. If we're going to take an honest look at the state of diversity in video games, we need to acknowledge that there are actually loads of women on dev teams and in positions of creative leadership who worked or have worked in all kinds of areas of the business. They make significant contributions. I challenge myself in 30 seconds how many really accomplished females do I know in game development. This is just how many I could fit on this slide. And the size of the pictures is in no way indicative of my esteem of the individuals. It's just, I told you I'm bad at slides, and so yeah, don't read anything into it or yell at me later about who I didn't include. So given that we already feel like we have special challenges, or like women might be at a disadvantage, what is with this tendency for us to undervalue or underestimate the contributions women have already made and are continuing to make in increasing numbers in our space? Like, why do we still act like it's super weird to see another woman in a restroom in a conference when it's happening more and more? Like for the past few years, I'm running into women in there, and still they're like, oh wow, great thing about this is that there's no lines, huh? It's like, no, why do we have to keep making that joke? Why do we have to? I mean, we're already, if we already feel challenged and devalued, why do we have to make it worse by humor? I don't understand that. So what if there is this high-powered vertex of the core console gaming business where everything is testosterone and breast physics and explosions? We also need to acknowledge how far we've gone in creating nuance. These are some games that I think are not quite like that for the most part. And we're trying to portray more relatable facets of the human experience. We're trying to have strong female heroines. We're creating games for brand new audiences across multiple platforms, not even in the console space, multiple platforms. And I feel strongly that we really do ourselves a disservice when we're too focused on how far we have to go, and we're not giving credit for how far we've come. We're not thanking ourselves for staying here and doing this work. Nonetheless, if attracting women to tech and helping them gain a stronger voice in entertainment media were a solved problem, or even a simple one, we wouldn't be here. So going with this idea that what I have to offer you today is no more and no less than my own experience, I'm going to tell you a little more about me again to try to provide an example of why I think it's challenging for our sectors to attract women, and why it's sometimes hard for us to see the progress we're making or to acknowledge the number of voices that we have. So I was pretty young when I decided to start writing about video games. Not this young, this is me on an Apple IIe when I was a little girl learning to play, but I was like 24, 25 when I started writing about video games, which is young enough that I could have been considered maybe a little immature or intolerable maybe, I guess. Posing in the GameStop, awesome. Yeah, no, so I just went and started this blog. So I started this blog. This is my blog, Sexy Video Game Land. I called it that because of sexy as a marketing buzzword. Sexy meaning something that's fresh and hip and relevant. Sexy is not a gendered concept, which I often have to remind my readers who are like, well, if you don't want to be harassed for your gender, change the name of your blog. No, go away. So yeah, when I started this blog, I thought about what I could offer that wasn't already out there. I thought I could be successful by writing the kind of articles I wanted to read that I wasn't finding out there. And so I thought about what made me different. I thought about, when I thought about what I wanted that wasn't out there, I thought, I really wanted to do deep analytical stuff. So deep, such a deep person. No, I wanted to do deep analytical stuff. I wanted to write about sexuality and romance in games because, that hasn't really been the purview of the traditional games press. And then I also thought, well, hey, I am a girl, and that maybe means I think about things differently than all these dudes. That thought that being different or part of a minority group gave me a fresh voice that people might want, it wasn't really something that I really took full ownership of at first. Like, on one hand, I must have believed it, but on the other hand, I felt really conditioned not to call attention to my gender or to make the majority male audience that started driving my traffic feel too challenged or too threatened in any way. And I wanted to distance myself from like this kind of thing too, from being perceived as manipulative. As a result, I think I made a lot of mistakes on my way to finding my voice that could have been destructive if I didn't reach a point where I had to accept that I didn't just speak for myself anymore. For example, I don't actually get offended by female characters in impractical armor. This is Bayonetta. She's an action heroine with ridiculous body proportions. Her hair is alive. She wears it as clothes, and when she fights, sometimes her hair comes off of her body and punches the enemy, and she stands there naked while her hair punches the enemy. And it's super absurd, and I actually really love this game. It's really fun to play. It's really stylish and weird, and I think Bayonetta looks cool. Personally, I don't believe that whether or not a female character is admirable depends on what she's wearing or how big her boobs are. I also hate the idea that for women to be admirable or to be respected and included, they have to have turtlenecks and sneakers. Like, I don't like when the conversation gets sidetracked onto how sexy images of women or how the women themselves are or aren't allowed to be. To me, that's still more of those forces controlling how I am allowed to represent and express myself, and to me, it doesn't have anything to do with anything. I resent the idea that a woman with big breasts is somehow offensive or she's got to be stupid or something like that. I also don't like the idea that we can't make stylized expressions of the female body, or that we're so sensitive that we're all going to develop self-esteem disorders at the first sight of any shape that isn't completely realistic. Personally, I don't obligate every character I view or interact with in media to be a reflection of myself or my values. But because of that, because of that viewpoint of mine, when I was younger, I ended up really defending this type of content where, I could make the argument that maybe it would be totally okay to have Bayonetta if she was just one in a sea of really positive examples, and she wasn't just, you know what I mean? Like, I saw myself as defending this content, and that was what I focused on, and with telling other people that they should be less sensitive. Of course, my male audience was really happy to see this girl telling them it was okay to ogle breast physics, but I wasn't really hearing people who wanted different things and who wanted more than that, and I wasn't representing them either. I mean, on one hand, I believed that my female perspective gave me this opportunity to help create diversity, and yet I wasn't living that for a while. I wanted to see games grow and change, but I ended up mostly using my platform to defend their right to stay the same. This was partly because I didn't know any better. I lacked female mentors to help me see differently. Not necessarily because they weren't there, but because I think I needed to believe that I was rare or that I was on my own. So this is why these kinds of events that bring us close together and let us network with other people are important for all of us, but particularly for young women, to view themselves as having the opportunity to play a really constructive role in media. And so, like, you know, for a long time I had this ambivalence towards seeking support from other women, because I wasn't ready to admit that our common experience mattered and that it was important. I wasn't sure how important it was to me, so I ignored it. And unfortunately, I used to avoid groups for women in games and tech because I was already leery of being pigeonholed as that writer who is always making a fuss about how she's a woman. In my audience, there will be people in my audience who always call me that. I see it on Twitter. I see it in the comments of my Kotaku articles all the time. If I mention it at all, I'm calling attention to my gender. I'm making a fuss. Yeah, so I'm still careful of that sometimes, which brings me to the biggest reason that I struggled to find my voice. I was afraid, and I imagine a lot of us operate under that same secret fear, that if we embrace the idea that we have something to offer from our perspective as a woman, we'll undermine ourselves somehow, that we just shouldn't make a big deal out of it, and that if we just do good work, the recognition will come. And of course we should do good work, and I'm not suggesting that being in any kind of minority group is something that you need to put at the forefront of your identity if you don't wish to. But you don't reduce yourself by feeling empowered, you know, by what makes you different, and you certainly don't reduce yourself by trying to empower others. You know, I never asked to be a role model. I hadn't intended on it, but the other option is not to be one, and that doesn't seem like much of a decision to me. So what did I learn from my journey to grow up and pull my head out of my ass? So I learned I had to take ownership of my own perspective if anything I did was ever going to be useful to anyone. I learned that I had, and I still have lots to learn from making sure that some of my heroes and mentors are strong female voices. But I think the reason that I wanted to tell you all that story about myself was to illustrate that while it's relatively easy for us all to get together and speak positively about diversity and stuff, our private experiences, the private experiences of individual women trying to join our fields, are not always so straightforward as we might hope or expect. I suspected that I might not have been alone in that difficult journey that I had to find my identity. Most importantly, I wanted to posit that if you're a woman in tech who's struggling with the uncertainty of what all this stuff means, if you're experiencing the stress of your own role, if you're not sure how you want to represent yourself, if you feel overwhelmed sometimes by that mandate, I think that's completely normal and you're not alone. And that's why we need to get together so that we can experience that. I mean, I could just be a total weirdo, but I suspect I'm not. I hope I'm not. I'm glad, I came here to find out. I don't always find it all so easy. I don't think any of us do. And that's why, one more time, it's amazing we're all doing this here today. And it's not because we're some kind of special interest group or because we want special treatment or because we're trying to segregate ourselves to be viewed as a collective of X chromosomes or fans of X chromosomes, as the case may be. The process of finding our feet in these kinds of spaces can be fraught and complicated, and we need to talk honestly amongst ourselves and help each other. Yeah, I hesitated initially about making this talk so personal, about talking so much about what I have felt and experienced. I had that panic of, they're going to think that you're completely narcissistic, droning on about yourself. You should be quiet. You should try to find something that's helpful for everyone. You shouldn't speak about yourself. And then I sort of thought about it a while, and I think that's how we as women are often conditioned. We often feel obligated, socialized to do for others rather than talk about ourselves. We expect to be chastised when we talk too much. I chose to fight that fear that I had, the fear that what I had to say from my own experience had nothing to offer others. I did that because I hoped that some of you guys would relate and maybe come to see the ways that your personal journeys have takeaways to offer others too. To add these much needed voices, your voices, to the fields in which we work, I'd like us all to be less afraid to speak up and to offer our perspectives and experiences up to one another. because then we move on from just talking about women in media to being women, or people who happen to be women, among other things, talking about media and our own identities with it, which actually I think that would be ideal for us to do. You know, instead of talking about women in tech, instead of talking about women in games, we can talk about ourselves as women as a factor in our experience of our work. Yeah, and again, no matter how many articles I write on the business trends, no matter how many interviews with developers I publish, no matter what type of work I do, I'm always going to get that female game journalist thing. At least, hopefully there will soon be others, and to the point where I don't feel like such a standout or such a rarity. You know, there are actually loads of female game journalists. I'm just the loudest one. Yeah, so yeah, I get that odd email. I'm always going to get those emails from those people who are hopefully teenage boys telling me to shut up and get back in the kitchen. But something that I learned from being exposed to that kind of thing tons and tons of times is that isn't my fault. It isn't a sign that I'm failing, because thanks to endemic sexism and their fear of change, they were going to do those things to me anyway. The only way to stop them from doing that is to keep talking, to keep making the kind of progress that we're making, to keep carving out a place for ourselves. So even though, you know, as I've gotten done saying, I'm often ambivalent toward the role people place me in as a female voice in my space, I've learned, and I'm determined now to own my perspective toward every single one of the factors that influence it. These days when I get one of those gendered angry emails, I know that I'm doing something right. Like, I think it was Seth Killian from the Street Fighter team. He said that, you know, the Street Fighter community has gotten louder. You know, someone asked about sexism in Street Fighter and why it's such a male-dominated competitive sport, and why there's so much, you know, blathering on in the comments from these angry teenage boys. And he said something to the effect of, I think when a community starts to change, that's when you see those crosses on the lawn. And I think we're starting to see the crosses on the lawn, and it means we should keep going, you know? I feel like, you know, we need to trigger that panic response that gives birth to new societies. People freak out when they see things changing. I want us to rock their worlds, because I really believe that games can speak to more people that they do. And for that to happen, you know, they need all of us. They need you. So I guess in closing, I'd like to ask everyone here, you know, you're the creators of media who make the things I love to experience and to share with others, to keep a few things in mind so that I can love those things even more and share them with even more people. Embrace that your perspective makes you necessary. Don't minimize that. Stick together. Learn, support, you know, learn from one another, support one another. Find mentorship from other women in your community, and offer that to others where you can. And most of all, no matter what anyone says, no matter how they try to take your voice from you or what they have to say about it, no matter how you want to use it, never shut up. That is my one philosophy. I hope you never do. Thank you. You can get in touch with me anytime. I really appreciate you having me here today.